"Get out. We don't serve people like you here." The racial slurs echoed through the marble lobby of First National Bank as chaos erupted around an elegantly dressed black woman. Two burly security guards were physically dragging her toward the glass doors, her designer coat wrinkled from their rough handling. Branch manager Linda Thompson stood behind them, her face twisted with pure hatred as she screamed, "I told you people, you don't belong here. We don't serve your kind at this respectable establishment." The other staff members had gathered around, their faces filled with the same disgusting prejudice. Teller Sarah Mitchell was laughing and pointing. "Look at her thinking she's somebody important." Senior teller Mary Patterson shook her head with disgust. "They always try to scam us with fake checks." The racist comments were flying from every direction as they treated this woman like she was less than human. But then something incredible happened. The woman suddenly broke free from the guard's grip with surprising strength. Instead of running or fighting back, she calmly reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. The entire lobby fell silent as she dialed a number, her voice cutting through their hatred like a blade. Suddenly, the atmosphere changed as Linda Thompson's expression instantly transformed. The smug satisfaction and racial hatred drained from her face, replaced by something that looked like pure, ice-cold terror. Her mouth fell open as she recognized that name. The security guards froze mid-step. The other racist staff members stopped laughing, because somehow, everyone in that bank lobby was about to discover that the black woman they had just racially abused and physically assaulted wasn't just any customer. What happened next shocked everyone to their core, and proved that sometimes, the universe has the most poetic sense of justice you could ever imagine. But to understand how they got to this incredible moment of racial reckoning, we need to go back 3 hours earlier to what had started as an ordinary Tuesday morning for Dr. Patricia Williams. If you want to see the most satisfying karma to ever happen, make sure you subscribe, tell us where you're watching from, and type karma in the comment section, because this story will show you exactly what happens when racists mess with the wrong person. Now let me take you back to where this all began. 3 hours before these racist employees discovered they had made the biggest mistake of their lives. 3 hours earlier, Dr. Patricia Williams had been driving through the familiar streets of her childhood neighborhood in her modest, silver Honda Accord. This accomplished neurosurgeon had just returned from a 6-month sabbatical in Switzerland, where she had been conducting groundbreaking research at one of Europe's most prestigious medical institutions. Most people would never guess that the woman behind the wheel of this ordinary car actually owned 3 luxury vehicles parked at her second home in the hills. But Patricia had deliberately chosen to drive the Honda today. She was heading to First National Bank, carrying a $50,000 insurance settlement check in her purse. Money she intended to donate to the local community clinic to purchase desperately needed medical equipment. After spending months in Switzerland's advanced medical facilities, she had seen firsthand what proper equipment could do for patient outcomes, and she was determined to bring some of that excellence back to her community. But what Patricia didn't know was that she was about to walk into a den of racial hatred that had been festering for over 2 decades. Inside that bank, branch manager Linda Thompson had been building her own little kingdom of prejudice. At 48 years old, Thompson had worked at First National for 22 years, and during that time, she had made it her personal mission to keep what she called undesirable elements out of her branch. Thompson didn't just harbor racist views, she actively promoted them. She had spent years carefully hiring staff members who shared her bigoted worldview, creating a toxic culture where discrimination wasn't just tolerated, it was celebrated. Thompson's closest ally was 35-year-old teller Sarah Mitchell, a white woman who had been working at the bank for 10 years and had fully embraced Thompson's racist ideology. Sarah didn't just discriminate against minority customers, she actually enjoyed it. For her, humiliating Black and Hispanic customers wasn't just part of the job. It was entertainment. She would often make openly discriminatory comments and then laugh about it with her colleagues, believing she was somehow protecting the bank's reputation. But the toxic culture didn't stop there. Thompson had assembled an entire team of like-minded individuals who shared her prejudiced views. There was Kevin Walsh, the 42-year-old security supervisor and former police officer who had left the force after multiple complaints about excessive force, particularly against minorities. Kevin saw his role at the bank as continuing his mission to intimidate and control Black customers who he believed didn't belong there. Then there was Mary Patterson, a 54-year-old senior teller who had been making snide comments about minority customers for years. Mary had perfected the art of subtle racism, using coded language and condescending tones to make Black customers feel unwelcome without saying anything that could be easily reported to corporate. Together, this group had turned First National Bank into a place where racism thrived behind a veneer of professional respectability. They had gotten away with it for years because they were careful, strategic, and supported each other's discriminatory behavior. So when Dr. Patricia Williams walked through those glass doors that Tuesday morning, she had no idea she was entering what was essentially a racist fortress. The moment she stepped inside, multiple pairs of hostile eyes immediately focused on her. These weren't just unwelcoming glances. These were the calculated stares of people who had already decided she didn't belong there based solely on the color of her skin. What Patricia also didn't know was that her simple banking transaction was about to expose decades of systematic racism and ultimately lead to the most spectacular downfall these bigots had ever witnessed. That morning, when Dr. Patricia Williams approached Sarah Mitchell's teller window, the hostility was immediate and unmistakable. Sarah looked her up and down with obvious disgust, her lip curling as if she had just smelled something rotten. There was no professional greeting, no customer service smile, just pure contempt as Sarah snapped, "What do you want?" The tone was so unprofessional, so deliberately disrespectful, that other customers in line began to notice. A middle-aged white couple behind Patricia exchanged uncomfortable glances but said nothing. An elderly man reading a newspaper lowered it slightly to watch the interaction unfold. Patricia, maintaining her dignity despite the blatant disrespect, calmly placed her $50,000 insurance settlement check on the counter. "I'd like to cash this check, please." The check was crisp, official, bearing the letterhead of one of the nation's largest insurance companies. It was clearly legitimate to anyone with functioning eyes. But instead of processing the transaction professionally, Sarah snatched the check from the counter with deliberate aggression and began examining it like she was holding a piece of garbage. She held it up to the light, squinted at it suspiciously, turned it over multiple times, and even had the audacity to smell it. The performance was theatrical, designed to humiliate Patricia in front of the growing line of customers. After this ridiculous display, Sarah had the nerve to ask, "Where did you get this? This looks suspicious." Her voice was loud enough for half the lobby to hear, and Patricia could feel the stares of other customers burning into her back. What happened next was even more shocking. Without any attempt at discretion or professionalism, Sarah loudly announced to the entire bank lobby, "Linda, we got another one trying to cash a fake check." The phrase "another one" was particularly galling, implying this was a regular occurrence with people who looked like Patricia. Her voice carried across the marble floors, causing every customer in the bank to turn and stare at Patricia. The humiliation was intentional, calculated, designed to make Patricia feel like a criminal in front of everyone. The whispers started immediately. Did she just say a fake check? Another one? What's going on over there? Patricia felt the weight of dozens of judgmental stares, but she held her head high, refusing to be broken by their ignorance. From across the lobby, senior teller Mary Patterson chimed in with a knowing smirk. "They never learn, do they?" The racist commentary was casual, delivered with the confidence of someone who had never faced consequences for such behavior. Mary had perfected this routine over years of serving minority customers, always making sure her comments were just loud enough to be heard, but quiet enough to maintain plausible deniability if anyone complained. Other staff members began to gather, drawn by the commotion like vultures circling prey. Brad Collins abandoned his loan applications to come watch the show. Kevin Walsh stepped away from his security post, his hand already moving toward his radio. This wasn't just one employee's racism. This was a coordinated effort by the entire toxic culture Linda Thompson had created. That's when branch manager Linda Thompson came storming over, her heels clicking aggressively against the marble floor. Her face was already twisted with anger before she had even looked at the situation. She didn't bother to examine the check, didn't ask about the transaction details, didn't even make eye contact with Patricia. The dismissal was complete and immediate. "Ma'am, you need to leave." "We don't serve your kind here," Thompson declared, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had said these words many times before. The phrase "your kind" hung in the air like poison, and several customers gasped audibly at the blatant racism. Patricia, demonstrating remarkable composure that would have impressed anyone with an ounce of human decency, simply responded, "I'd like to cash my check, please." Her voice remained steady, professional, dignified. Everything these bank employees were not. But Thompson wasn't having it. Her face flushed red with anger as she practically spat her response. "I don't care what piece of paper you have. Take your business somewhere else." The contempt in her voice was unmistakable, and Patricia could see other customers shifting uncomfortably, some beginning to realize they were witnessing something deeply wrong. When Patricia calmly explained that this was a legitimate insurance settlement, Thompson's prejudice became even more apparent. "Insurance settlement? For what? Let me guess, you probably staged some accident to get money you don't deserve." The accusation was as baseless as it was cruel, but Thompson was just getting started. "I'm a neurosurgeon," Patricia explained calmly, hoping that revealing her profession might bring some sanity to the situation. "I'm donating this money to the community clinic." But instead of respect for her profession and accomplishments, Patricia was met with disbelief and open mockery. Sarah Mitchell burst into cruel laughter. "Doctor? Yeah, right. And I'm the Queen of England." The laughter was harsh, designed to wound, and it echoed through the lobby as other staff members joined in. Mary Patterson cackled. "Neurosurgeon? These people really think we're stupid. Next she'll be telling us she owns a hospital." The irony was lost on her. Patricia was indeed one of the most respected neurosurgeons in the city. Linda Thompson's racism reached new heights as she declared, "Listen, lady, I don't know what kind of scam you're running, but we're not buying it. No doctor would dress like that," she said, gesturing dismissively at Patricia's scrubs under her coat. "And they certainly wouldn't come to our neighborhood bank." Kevin Walsh stepped closer, his intimidating presence meant to frighten Patricia into leaving. "Ma'am, you need to walk away before this gets ugly. We've seen every trick in the book." But Patricia stood her ground. "I simply want to cash a legitimate check. I've provided identification, explained the source of the funds, and been nothing but professional. Your behavior is discriminatory and unacceptable." This only enraged Thompson further. "Discriminatory? You come in here with your fake story, trying to cash what's obviously a fraudulent check, and then you have the nerve to accuse us of discrimination? We're protecting this bank from criminals like you." The racist commentary from the staff continued to flow. Brad Collins chimed in. "They always play the race card when they get caught." Mary Patterson nodded vigorously. "It's their go-to move when their scams don't work." Sarah Mitchell waved the check in the air mockingly. $50,000 for a neurosurgeon? Right. If you're a doctor, I'm the President of the United States." The staff erupted in laughter again, feeding off each other's cruelty. Throughout this escalating verbal assault and intimidation, Dr. Patricia Williams maintained her dignity and composure in a way that would have impressed anyone with an ounce of human decency. Despite being surrounded by hostile employees, despite the racist accusations flying at her from every direction, despite the humiliation of being treated like a criminal in front of a lobby full of witnesses, she kept her voice steady and professional. "I understand you may have concerns about fraud," Patricia said with remarkable patience, "but I've provided everything you've requested. Perhaps we could speak with your supervisor or review your policies for handling legitimate insurance settlements." But Linda Thompson had no interest in policies or procedures. Her hatred had taken complete control. "The only policy you need to worry about is our policy of not serving criminals. And that's exactly what you are, a criminal trying to steal from hard-working people." The situation had escalated far beyond simple poor customer service. This was systematic, coordinated racial harassment by an entire bank staff, witnessed by dozens of customers who were too shocked or intimidated to intervene. Patricia found herself completely isolated, surrounded by hostility, with no one willing to speak up for basic human decency. The racist employees of First National Bank thought they held all the power, thought they could treat Patricia Williams like dirt and face no consequences. They had gotten away with this behavior for years, protected by their manager's support and their own arrogance. But they had no idea that their world was about to be turned completely upside down in the most spectacular way imaginable. If you're watching this and feeling your blood boil at the injustice of what Patricia was experiencing, make sure you subscribe, because what happens next will show you that sometimes the universe has perfect timing when it comes to serving justice to racists who think they're untouchable. Tell me in the comments, how do you think you would have reacted if you were in Patricia's shoes? Would you leave the bank for peace to reign, or wait to make sure they all regret their actions? The tension in First National Bank reached a boiling point as Linda Thompson's racism escalated to dangerous new levels. But what happened next shocked even the other customers who had been witnessing this systematic discrimination unfold before their eyes. "You know what I think?" Thompson declared loudly, her voice filled with malicious confidence as she surveyed Patricia like a predator cornering its prey. "I think this woman is involved in money laundering. Nobody gets $50,000 legitimately and walks into a neighborhood bank like this. This is organized crime written all over it." The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud, poisoning the atmosphere even further. Sarah Mitchell's eyes lit up with vicious excitement as she clapped her hands together. "Money laundering. That makes perfect sense. She's probably working for drug dealers or gang members." Mary Patterson nodded vigorously, her voice filled with vindictive satisfaction. "I knew something was off about her story. Real doctors don't walk around with checks this big unless they're dirty." Brad Collins abandoned his post entirely to join the mob. "We should call the FBI. This is way bigger than just bank fraud." Kevin Walsh stepped closer to Patricia, his massive frame casting an intimidating shadow as he cracked his knuckles menacingly. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to stay right where you are. This is now a federal crime investigation, and you're the prime suspect." The other customers in the lobby were becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the escalating situation. Some were edging toward the exits, not wanting to be witnesses to whatever was about to happen. Others stood frozen, unsure whether they should intervene or call for help themselves. But Patricia Williams wasn't just any victim. This accomplished neurosurgeon had faced life-and-death situations in operating rooms where split-second decisions meant the difference between saving a life and losing a patient. She had navigated hostile hospital politics where male colleagues had tried to undermine her at every turn. She had endured decades of systemic racism in the medical field, fighting for respect and recognition that was freely given to her white male counterparts. This moment was just another challenge to overcome with grace and strategic thinking. Patricia stepped back calmly and pulled out her phone, her fingers moving with the precision of someone who had performed thousands of delicate surgical procedures. As the racist staff watched with growing anger and Kevin Walsh loomed over her like a predator, Patricia made a call that would change everything forever. "Dr. Chen? It's Patricia. I need you to cancel my 3 p.m. meeting immediately. Tell the patient we'll reschedule for tomorrow morning." Her voice was steady, professional, carrying an authority that seemed to cut through the chaos around her like a surgeon's scalpel. Then she said something that should have made every person in that lobby stop and pay careful attention. "And Michael? Call William Hartford immediately. Tell him it's time. Yes, tell him exactly those words. It's time. He'll know what I mean." But Linda Thompson had reached her breaking point. The sight of Patricia making phone calls, maintaining her dignity despite being surrounded by hostility, refusing to be intimidated or broken by their racist assault, it enraged her beyond any semblance of reason or professionalism. Thompson's face turned an alarming shade of red as she screamed, "How dare you make phone calls while we're investigating your crimes? You think you can call your criminal associates right in front of us?" Sarah Mitchell was practically bouncing with malicious glee. "She's probably calling her drug dealer friends to warn them we're onto their money laundering operation." The situation was spiraling completely out of control, but it was about to get much worse. Linda Thompson, drunk on her own power and consumed by racist hatred, made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "Give me that check," Thompson snarled with vicious intent, snatching the $50,000 insurance settlement from Sarah's hands with violent aggression. Before anyone could react or stop her, she grabbed both sides of the check with her manicured nails and ripped it in half with sadistic satisfaction. The tearing sound echoed through the marble lobby like a gunshot. "There. Now you can take your fake money laundering scheme somewhere else," Thompson declared triumphantly, throwing the torn pieces into the air like confetti. The fragments of Patricia's legitimate insurance settlement fluttered to the marble floor like dying leaves. The sound of tearing paper and Thompson's triumphant declaration sent shockwaves through the lobby. Patricia watched in stunned disbelief as pieces of her legitimate $50,000 insurance settlement, money she had planned to donate to help underprivileged patients, scattered across the floor like trash. The other customers gasped audibly, some covering their mouths in horror. Even those who had been uncertain about the situation knew that destroying someone's check was completely illegal and morally reprehensible. "You just destroyed my property," Patricia said quietly, her voice filled with controlled anger that was more frightening than any scream. "That was a legitimate insurance settlement worth $50,000 that I planned to donate to the community clinic." "Legitimate?" Thompson shrieked, her voice echoing off the marble walls with unhinged rage. "You criminal! You money laundering criminal! You terrorist!" The accusations were getting more wild and desperate with each word. Sarah Mitchell was practically hyperventilating with excitement. "She's probably financing terrorism too. That's what they do with laundered money." Kevin Walsh flexed his muscles threateningly. "Maybe we should search her for weapons. These criminals are always armed." Mary Patterson pointed an accusatory finger. "Check her purse. Probably full of drugs and more fake checks." And then, in front of dozens of witnesses, multiple security cameras, and in broad daylight, Linda Thompson did something that would end her career forever and land her in legal trouble for years to come. She slapped Patricia Williams across the face with all the force she could muster. The sound of the slap cracked through the bank lobby like thunder, sharp and violent and unmistakable. Patricia's head snapped to the side from the brutal force of the blow, and shocked gasps erupted from every corner of the room. Some customers immediately pulled out their phones to record the assault. Others started backing toward the exits in fear, and a few brave souls looked like they wanted to intervene but were too stunned to move. The red handprint on Patricia's cheek was clearly visible, a mark of shame that belonged entirely to Linda Thompson. But Patricia slowly turned her face back toward her attacker, her dignity intact despite the physical assault, her composure unbroken despite the humiliation. "You just committed assault and battery in front of dozens of witnesses and security cameras," Patricia said calmly, her voice steady despite the stinging pain in her cheek. "That was a criminal act." But Thompson was beyond reason now, completely drunk on her own power and consumed by racist hatred that had been building for decades. She was living out every racist fantasy she had ever harbored, finally able to physically attack a black person without any immediate consequences. Kevin, arrest this criminal right now," Thompson screamed, pointing at Patricia like she was some kind of dangerous fugitive. "She's money laundering. She tried to cash fake checks. She threatened me, and she assaulted me. Did you see how she threatened me?" The lies were flowing freely now, a complete inversion of reality that demonstrated just how deep Thompson's racism ran. In her twisted mind, she was the victim of this encounter, not the perpetrator of systematic discrimination and assault. Kevin Walsh, the former police officer with a documented history of excessive force against minorities, grabbed his radio and called for immediate backup with obvious excitement in his voice. "Central, this is Kevin at First National downtown. We need multiple police units immediately. We have a black female suspect for money laundering, check fraud, assault on bank personnel, and making terrorist threats. The subject is dangerous and violent and needs to be arrested with extreme caution." The description he gave bore no resemblance to the calm, professional woman standing before him, but Kevin had been looking forward to this moment for months. This was his chance to be the hero, to use force against someone he had already decided was guilty based solely on the color of her skin. Sarah Mitchell was literally jumping up and down with sadistic excitement, clapping her hands like she was watching her favorite movie. "Did you see her threaten Linda? She's violent. She's dangerous. Get her out of here before she hurts someone else." Mary Patterson was practically foaming at the mouth with vindictive pleasure. "Probably has weapons too. These people always do. Search her thoroughly." Brad Collins was recording everything on his phone, his face glowing with anticipation. "I got the whole thing. The assault, the threats, the money laundering attempt. This is going to be the best evidence package corporate has ever seen." The racist staff was feeding off each other's hatred like a pack of hyenas, each trying to outdo the others in their cruelty and vindictiveness. They had created their own reality, where Patricia was the criminal and they were the heroes protecting society from dangerous elements. What none of these racist employees knew, what they couldn't possibly have imagined in their wildest dreams, was that 6 months earlier, Dr. Patricia Williams had been conducting her own comprehensive investigation into their discriminatory practices. Through her volunteer work at the community clinic, she had heard complaint after complaint about First National Bank's systematic racism. Elderly black customers denied basic banking services despite having accounts for decades. Young Hispanic families rejected for loans they clearly qualified for. Small business owners treated like criminals for trying to make simple deposits. Patricia had realized that this wasn't just individual prejudice from a few bad employees. It was systematic, institutionalized racism that had been allowed to flourish for decades under Linda Thompson's leadership. The discrimination was so blatant, so well documented through community complaints and witness testimonies, that Patricia knew drastic action was required. So during her 6-month sabbatical in Switzerland, while everyone thought she was simply conducting medical research at European hospitals, Patricia had been quietly working with financial advisors, legal teams, and investment specialists to purchase a controlling stake in First National Bank. The acquisition had cost her nearly $8 million of her own money, but Patricia viewed it as an investment in justice and community healing. The purchase had been conducted through multiple shell companies and legal intermediaries, keeping her identity completely secret from everyone except the board of directors. The acquisition paperwork had been filed in Switzerland, routed through Cayman Islands corporations, and processed through New York investment firms. By the time the transaction was complete, Patricia Williams owned 67% of First National Bank, making her the majority shareholder and effective owner of the institution that was now assaulting her. The board of directors knew about the ownership change, but Patricia had specifically requested that they not inform the branch staff immediately. She wanted to document the racist behavior firsthand, to gather irrefutable evidence that would stand up in court and justify the massive changes she was planning to implement. Now Kevin Walsh was physically grabbing Patricia's arms with unnecessary force, trying to restrain her like she was a dangerous criminal who had just committed multiple felonies. "You're under arrest for money laundering, check fraud, assault on bank personnel, and making terrorist threats." His voice boomed through the lobby as he roughly pulled her arms behind her back. Patricia remained calm and dignified, even as rough hands grabbed her, even as she was being illegally detained and falsely accused. "I am Dr. Patricia Williams. I am a neurosurgeon at Metropolitan Hospital. You are committing assault on an innocent customer who has done nothing wrong." But the racist staff was in full celebration mode now, completely intoxicated by what they believed was their triumph over a criminal. Linda Thompson rubbed her hand where she had slapped Patricia, putting on an Academy Award-worthy performance as she pretended to be the victim. "She attacked me. Thank God Kevin was here to protect us. Who knows what she might have done if we hadn't stopped her." Sarah Mitchell was practically gloating with sadistic pleasure. "Finally, justice is served. Take her away. Make sure she never comes back to this neighborhood." Mary Patterson was wiping fake tears from her eyes. "I was so scared. She looked like she was going to hurt all of us. Thank you for keeping us safe." Brad Collins continued recording, narrating like he was making a documentary. "This is how we deal with criminals at First National Bank. Zero tolerance for fraud and violence." Earlier, Sarah Mitchell had been straining to overhear fragments of Patricia's phone conversation, and she had caught the words "board meeting" and "Hartford." Now, even as Patricia was being illegally detained, Sarah burst into mocking laughter that echoed through the lobby. "Did you hear that? Even while being arrested for money laundering, she's still committed to this elaborate fantasy. Now she's pretending to call emergency board meetings with Chairman William Hartford himself." The racist staff erupted in cruel, hysterical laughter that demonstrated just how disconnected from reality they had become. Mary Patterson was wiping tears from her eyes. Even criminals have imagination these days. Board meetings with the chairman. What's next? Claiming she owns the entire banking system? Kevin Walsh tightened his grip on Patricia's arms. "Lady, the only board meeting you're going to is with a parole board in about 5 years. Linda Thompson was practically cackling with delight. "William Hartford calling board meetings for a money launderer. That's the funniest thing I've heard all year." But their laughter and celebration were about to be cut very short, replaced by horror and disbelief that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Because at that exact moment, the glass doors of First National Bank opened with authority, and William Hartford stepped inside with 2 corporate security officers flanking him like bodyguards. Hartford was an imposing figure, tall, distinguished, silver-haired, wearing an expensive Italian suit that immediately commanded respect from everyone in the lobby. His presence changed the entire atmosphere of the room, from chaotic hatred to stunned silence. The corporate security officers weren't local rent-a-cops like Kevin Walsh. These were serious professionals in dark suits with earpieces and the kind of military bearing that suggested federal law enforcement backgrounds. The racist staff of First National Bank saw Hartford's arrival and immediately assumed he was there to support them and witness their triumph over Patricia. Linda Thompson's face lit up with vindictive satisfaction as she approached him confidently, her chest puffed out with pride at what she believed was her greatest professional achievement. "Mr. Hartford?" "Perfect timing, sir. "We've just arrested a dangerous money launderer who was trying to defraud the bank with fake documents and terrorist threats," Thompson declared triumphantly, gesturing toward Patricia like she had just captured public enemy number one. Kevin Walsh straightened his posture and nodded approvingly, still restraining Patricia with unnecessary force. "Sir, we've got everything completely under control. Caught her red-handed with money laundering schemes, fake checks, and violent behavior. She even assaulted Miss Thompson." Sarah Mitchell was practically bouncing with excitement, pointing dramatically at Patricia. "Mr. Hartford's going to see exactly how well we protect this bank from dangerous criminals. We documented everything." Mary Patterson stepped forward eagerly, her voice filled with self-righteous pride. "Sir, you should have heard the ridiculous story she was telling. Claimed to be a neurosurgeon, claimed to be calling board meetings. The nerve of these people." Brad Collins waved his phone triumphantly. "I've got it all recorded, Mr. Hartford. Evidence of money laundering, assault, terrorist threats, and resisting arrest. This will make an excellent training video for other branches." What the racist employees didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have imagined in their wildest nightmares, was that William Hartford wasn't there to support them or congratulate them on their racist vigilantism. He was there because Patricia Williams had called him. And he knew exactly who she was and what she meant to the future of this bank. William Hartford, chairman of the board of directors of First National Bank, had been Patricia's classmate at Johns Hopkins Medical School over 30 years ago. They had maintained their friendship through the decades, had served on hospital boards together, had collaborated on medical research projects, and had shared a vision of using their success to create positive change in their communities. When Patricia had first approached him 6 months ago with her plan to acquire First National Bank, Hartford had been skeptical about the feasibility. But when she had shown him the documented evidence of systematic racism, the community complaints, the loan rejection patterns based on race, the witness testimonies, the statistical analysis of discriminatory practices, he had become not just supportive but actively involved in the acquisition strategy. As Hartford surveyed the scene before him with growing horror and rage, Patricia being physically restrained by security, the torn check scattered on the floor, the clear red handprint on her cheek from being slapped, the celebrating racist staff who thought they were heroes, his face darkened with a mixture of understanding, disgust, and barely controlled fury. The racist employees of First National Bank thought they were about to witness Patricia's final humiliation and their own vindication and promotion. They believed that corporate leadership would congratulate them for their vigilance, reward them for their dedication, and hold them up as examples for other branches to follow. They had no idea that they were actually witnessing the beginning of their own spectacular and devastating downfall. Patricia Williams stood in the center of that chaos, being illegally detained by people who hated her for the color of her skin. But she wasn't afraid. She had endured surgery residencies where attending physicians had questioned her abilities based on race. She had faced hospital administrators who had tried to limit her surgical privileges. She had overcome decades of systemic racism in medicine to become one of the most respected neurosurgeons in the country. This moment was just another obstacle to overcome with grace, dignity, and strategic thinking. She knew that justice was about to be served in the most satisfying and comprehensive way possible. The woman they had just assaulted, illegally detained, and tried to have arrested, was about to reveal herself as their new owner, and their world was about to come crashing down around them with the force of a controlled demolition. The stage was perfectly set for the most dramatic reversal of power and fortune that anyone in that bank lobby would ever witness in their lifetime. What do you think should happen to these employees? Should they be fired or forgiven after Patricia reveals herself? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you love stories like this. The physical confrontation escalated as Kevin Walsh grabbed Patricia's arm roughly, his former police training kicking in as he prepared to forcibly remove her from the premises. "Time to go, lady. You've caused enough trouble here," he growled, his grip tightening painfully around her arm. When William Hartford entered the lobby with his corporate security team, the racist staff immediately assumed he was there as backup to support their actions. Linda Thompson's face lit up with smug satisfaction as she approached him confidently, believing this was her moment of professional triumph. "Sir, we're handling this situation perfectly," Thompson declared proudly, gesturing toward Patricia being restrained by Kevin Walsh. "We've kept the riffraff out just like we always do. Corporate is going to be so proud of how we've protected the bank's interests." Hartford stood silently, taking in the scene before him, the torn check pieces scattered on the floor, Patricia's swollen cheek from being slapped, the hostile staff celebrating what they believed was their victory. His expression was unreadable, but something dangerous was building behind his eyes. Linda Thompson, emboldened by what she perceived as corporate support, made the biggest mistake of her professional life. She began bragging to Hartford about their systematic discrimination. "We've been keeping this branch clean for years, Mr. Hartford. We know how to spot troublemakers the moment they walk through those doors. These people think they can just walk in here and take advantage of hardworking Americans, but we don't let that happen." The other staff members, seeing their manager's confidence, piled on with their own proud declarations of racism. Sarah Mitchell stepped forward eagerly. "We protect this bank's reputation, sir. We make sure only the right kind of people feel welcome here." Mary Patterson nodded vigorously. "We don't let just anybody think they belong here. Standards have to be maintained." Brad Collins crossed his arms smugly. "Someone has to maintain standards in this neighborhood. We can't let it go downhill." Kevin Walsh, still gripping Patricia's arm, added, "We've got zero tolerance for these people trying to scam honest banks." As Hartford listened to this parade of racism, his horror grew with each word. These weren't isolated incidents or individual prejudices. This was systematic, institutionalized discrimination that had been cultivated and celebrated for years. He realized the full extent of what Patricia had been trying to tell him, and why drastic action had been necessary. Hartford quietly signaled to his corporate security guards, who immediately moved into action. They stepped toward Kevin Walsh with unmistakable authority. "Release her. Now." Kevin looked confused but complied, stepping back from Patricia. The corporate security team then positioned themselves between Patricia and the bank's staff, making it clear that the power dynamic had just shifted completely. Patricia straightened her jacket with the same precision she used when preparing for surgery. She looked directly at Linda Thompson, her voice calm but carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Miss Thompson, you're absolutely right about maintaining standards. That's why I bought this bank." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed, nobody spoke. Linda Thompson's brain struggled to process what she had just heard, her face contorting with confusion. "What? What did you just say?" Thompson stammered, her confidence evaporating like morning mist. William Hartford stepped forward and opened his briefcase with deliberate ceremony. He pulled out a thick folder of official documents and spread them across the counter where Patricia's torn check had been moments before. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hartford announced to the stunned lobby, "I'd like you to meet Dr. Patricia Williams, majority shareholder and owner of 67% of First National Bank." The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that marble lobby as the magnitude of the revelation sank in. Every person in the bank, customers, staff, security, stood frozen in shock as their entire understanding of the situation crumbled. Linda Thompson's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but no sound came out. Her face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and then pure terror as she realized what she had done. Kevin Walsh looked down at his hands, the same hands that had just physically assaulted the bank's owner, and his face went white as a sheet. He started backing away slowly, as if distance could somehow undo his actions. Sarah Mitchell's racist confidence crumbled completely. The woman who had been laughing and mocking Patricia moments before now stood trembling, her phone still in her hand with the evidence she thought would make her a hero. Mary Patterson covered her mouth in horror, finally understanding that every cruel comment, every snide remark, every moment of discrimination had been directed at the person who now controlled their jobs, their careers, their futures. Brad Collins started backing toward the exit, his face pale with the realization that he had just participated in the systematic harassment of the most powerful person in the building. The other customers in the lobby began whispering frantically among themselves. Some were pulling out phones to record this historic moment, others were shaking their heads in amazement, and a few were applauding quietly for Patricia. Patricia stood in the center of it all, no longer the victim being assaulted and arrested, but revealed as the ultimate authority in that building. The transformation was complete, from target to owner, from powerless to powerful, from victim to victor. The racist employees who had spent the morning tormenting her now stood in terrified silence, finally understanding that they hadn't been protecting the bank from a criminal. With the ownership documents spread across the counter, and the truth finally revealed, Patricia Williams stepped forward to address the stunned lobby. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had just gone from victim to victor in the most dramatic way possible. Everyone here just witnessed exactly why this bank needed new ownership, Patricia announced, her words echoing through the marble lobby with the precision of a surgeon making a life-saving diagnosis. What you've seen today isn't an isolated incident. It's the result of decades of systematic racism that I purchased this institution to eliminate once and for all. The silence in the lobby was deafening as customers, remaining staff, and security personnel tried to process the complete reversal of everything they thought they understood about the morning's events. The immediate consequences were swift and decisive. Patricia turned to face Linda Thompson, who was still stammering in shock and disbelief. Her racist arrogance completely shattered. Linda Thompson, you are terminated immediately for creating a discriminatory and hostile work environment, for assault and battery, and for destruction of customer property, Patricia declared with clinical precision. Security will escort you from the premises within the next 5 minutes, and you can expect to hear from our legal department regarding both civil and criminal charges. Thompson's legs nearly gave out as the reality hit her like a freight train. 22 years of employment, her entire career, her pension, her benefits, all gone in an instant because of her racist hatred. "You can't do this," she gasped. "I have rights. I have seniority." "You forfeited those rights when you chose to discriminate against customers and assault the bank's owner," Patricia replied coldly. Patricia's gaze moved to Sarah Mitchell, who was trembling like a leaf in a hurricane. "Sarah Mitchell, you are terminated immediately for customer abuse, discriminatory practices, and participating in systematic harassment. You have 15 minutes to clean out your desk and leave the premises." Sarah's racist confidence had completely crumbled, replaced by tears and desperate pleading. "Please, Dr. Williams, I was just following orders. I didn't mean anything by it. I have kids to feed. I'll change, I promise." "You should have thought about your children before you chose to humiliate and abuse innocent customers," Patricia responded without sympathy. "Your actions have consequences." But Patricia wasn't finished delivering justice. "Kevin Walsh, you are terminated immediately and will be facing assault charges for physically attacking a customer without cause. Corporate security will detain you until police arrive to place you under arrest." Kevin Walsh's face went from shock to panic as he realized he was about to be arrested for assaulting the bank owner. His law enforcement background made him keenly aware of how serious assault charges could be. "This is insane. I was doing my job. She was acting suspicious. Your job was customer service, not racial profiling and assault," Patricia stated firmly. "Mary Patterson, terminated immediately for discriminatory behavior and creating a hostile environment for minority customers. Patricia continued methodically, her voice never wavering. Brad Collins, terminated immediately for discriminatory lending practices and participating in harassment. The systematic firing continued as Patricia cleaned house with surgical precision. Each termination was delivered with the same calm authority she used when making life-or-death decisions in the operating room. The remaining bank employees who had witnessed the morning's events began to panic, realizing their jobs might be in jeopardy too. Some tried desperately to distance themselves from the racist core group, claiming they had always disagreed with the discrimination. Others quietly began clearing out their desks, assuming they would be next. A young teller named Maria Rodriguez approached Patricia nervously. "Dr. Williams, I want you to know that I never agreed with how they treated customers. I tried to speak up once, but Ms. Thompson threatened to fire me." Patricia studied Maria's face and saw genuine sincerity. "Thank you for speaking up, Maria. Employees like you are exactly who we need to rebuild this institution properly." Patricia walked over to the lobby monitor and accessed the security system with her new executive privileges. "Mr. Hartford, please display the security footage from the past 6 months on the main screen." The monitor flickered to life, showing a devastating montage of discriminatory behavior by Thompson's staff. Customer after customer, Black, Hispanic, Asian, elderly, young, being treated with contempt, having legitimate transactions questioned, being made to feel unwelcome simply because of their appearance or accent. The pattern was undeniable, systematic, and absolutely damning. "This ends today," Patricia declared, her voice filled with quiet determination that seemed to resonate through every corner of the building. "This systematic racism, this culture of hatred and discrimination stops now and forever." At that moment, the police officers that Kevin Walsh had called earlier arrived at the bank, expecting to arrest Patricia for money laundering, assault, and making terrorist threats. Instead, they found corporate executives, legal ownership documents, and a completely different situation than what had been reported over the radio. The lead officer looked confused as he surveyed the scene. "We got a call about a dangerous suspect committing bank fraud?" William Hartford approached the officers and calmly explained the real situation, showing them the ownership documents and security footage of what had actually transpired. Within minutes, the officers' attitudes had completely changed. "Ma'am, we sincerely apologize for the false report," the lead officer said to Patricia. "We'll be arresting Mr. Walsh for assault and filing additional charges for filing a false police report." Kevin Walsh was read his rights and handcuffed, while the officers apologized profusely to Patricia for being misled about the situation. Word of what had happened began spreading through the community like wildfire. Social media posts, phone calls, text messages. The news that the racist bank staff had been fired and the institution was under new ownership traveled faster than anyone could have imagined. Community members who had been previously mistreated by this very bank started arriving to witness the change in management with their own eyes. Elderly customers who had been denied basic services, young families who had been rejected for clearly legitimate loans, small business owners who had been humiliated and turned away. They all came to see justice finally being served after years of suffering in silence. The lobby began filling with people who had suffered under the old regime, and their faces showed a mixture of amazement, vindication, and cautious hope for the future. Some were crying tears of joy, others were shaking their heads in disbelief, and many were sharing their own stories of discrimination they had endured at this bank. Mrs. Dorothy Washington, a 78-year-old woman who had been banking there for 40 years, approached Patricia with tears in her eyes. "Child, I can't believe what I just witnessed. They've been treating us like dirt for decades. Bless you for what you've done." In a moment of beautiful poetic justice, Patricia walked over to the exact same teller window where Sarah Mitchell had refused to serve her just hours earlier. She presented a replacement check from her insurance company, They had expedited a new one after she explained the morning's events. "I'd like to cash this $50,000 check, please," Patricia said to the nervous temporary teller who had been called in to replace the terminated staff. Within minutes, the transaction was completed professionally, respectfully, and without a single discriminatory comment or suspicious look. The contrast with the morning's treatment was stark and meaningful. But Patricia wasn't keeping the money for herself. Right there in the lobby, in front of all the community members and remaining staff, she endorsed the back of the check and wrote out a donation to the local community clinic for the full $50,000. "This money will purchase desperately needed medical equipment for underserved patients," she announced to the gathered crowd. "It will help people who have been discriminated against by systems like this bank used to represent." The crowd erupted in applause and cheers as Patricia handed the donation check to Dr. James Foster, the clinic director who had arrived after hearing about the events. Patricia then addressed the remaining staff and gathered community members about the immediate and comprehensive changes taking effect throughout the institution. Effective immediately, this bank will implement mandatory diversity training for all employees, she announced with authority. "We're establishing community outreach programs, offering special loan programs for previously underserved communities, and creating a customer advocacy position to ensure no one is ever treated like I was today." She continued outlining her vision. "We'll be reviewing every loan rejection from the past 5 years to identify patterns of discrimination. Legitimate applicants who were wrongly denied will be contacted and offered new opportunities. We're also implementing a community advisory board to help guide our policies going forward." The crowd listened intently as Patricia detailed specific programs. "We'll offer financial literacy classes, small business development loans, first-time homebuyer assistance, and senior citizen banking services. This institution will actively work to repair the damage done by decades of discriminatory practices." As Linda Thompson was finally escorted out by corporate security, community members lined the lobby watching her departure with a mixture of satisfaction and disbelief. Some shook their heads in disgust at the years of mistreatment they had endured. Others called out, sharing their own experiences with her discrimination. "That's the woman who denied my daughter's college loan," shouted one mother. "She made me feel like a criminal for trying to open a simple checking account," said a young father. Thompson tried to cover her face as she was led past the people she had spent decades mistreating, but there was nowhere to hide from the justice that had finally caught up with her racist behavior. "This isn't over," Thompson shouted as she was escorted toward the exit. "I'll sue. This is illegal. You can't treat me like this." "Actually, we can," William Hartford replied calmly. "Employment discrimination works both ways, and your termination is completely justified and legal." Patricia stepped forward one final time to address the crowd that had gathered in the lobby. Her voice carried the weight of history and the promise of genuine change. "What happened here today represents much more than just individual accountability," she began, her words resonating through the marble lobby. "It represents the power of economic justice to create real, lasting change in our communities." If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and share with others so they can learn too. See you in our next video.